Welcome to Life Mastery Radio with Todd Allen and Jackie Bailey, the show that dives into the science of higher consciousness with inspiring topics such as abundance, intention, health, manifestation, love, and transformation. Join Todd, Jackie, and their guests of leading authors, speakers, coaches, and entrepreneurs weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific. Learn to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery. It's all right here with stories and messages to support your well-being and most evocative dreams. Now, here's your hosts, Todd and Jackie.
Hey, it's another groovy day, and most of you already know that's because, first off, I make it that way. When I get up in the morning, I already decide it's going to be a groovy day, and guess what? The day turns out really, really groovy. Something might happen, something might change, but I just think back, and hey, I started out groovy. I can turn this around. It's also groovy. It's Valentine's Day and it's Life Mastery Radio Day. This doesn't happen very often. And I get to hang out with some really cool people that are on the cutting edge of their own becoming. And mostly they're there to support and help you find your own path on your very own life mastery journey. So that's why we're here. Jackie and I show up every Tuesday. Have a blast. Our guests come and join us. They have a blast. We all have a blast. I know you'll have a blast too. And mostly, I want you to tell a friend how much of a blast you had and where you can find Life Mastery Radio. We're on YouTube. All of our shows are on YouTube. We have a website at lifemasteryradio.com. And all of that stuff, all things Life Mastery Radio can be found there, especially our newsletter. Jackie creates a newsletter once a week, and it highlights who's been on the show, who's coming on the show, and her blog post about the show we just did. So you can go to lifemasteryradio.com, sign up for that, and that's all we'll use that email address for, is to get you that newsletter, and you can stay up to date with all things Life Mastery Radio. Yay! You can find both Jackie and I's book there. Oh gosh, there's all kinds of things. And here I've been talking about putting the rest of your books, all of your other 100 books up on that website, Jackie, and I haven't done it yet.
I know. And you keep saying, I got to do it. And you haven't done it.
I'll make a mental note. How are you, my friend? It's Valentine's Day. And let's see. How long have you been helping me co-host this show? It's 3 years now, right?
I think it's 4.
4 years.
Yeah.
4 years, and I've watched you grow so much. You're like this globetrotter now. I mean, over the weekend you were in Dallas, and then coming up you're going to be in LA. Where else are you going? You might be going to the Caribbean. I mean, it's just crazy, lady. Keep up with you.
I know. I might actually be part of a reality show that we'll be filming in Mexico sometime this summer as well. So we'll see how that goes. We'll find out in March when I'm in LA if that's a go or not. But this past weekend, I got to tell you, I was at the Speakers Playhouse live event. Now, this is a network of people that are speakers, coaches, entrepreneurs who have been meeting online since the start of the pandemic. And lots of people that I've met there, we've had as guests on our show. Kitty Andrews.
Oh, wow.
Martin Salama. Shiraz Babu, Dr. Ali Lankarani, they were there. And I have pictures, a selfie of me with them that I got to post on our page, our Life Mastery Radio page, so that people can see, hey, we're meeting in person. And it's great to meet up with guests who've been on the show and get to know them a little bit better personally. So that was really exciting, and just got back last night from that event in Dallas, Texas.
We should plug that venue, right? That Speakers Playhouse, that you have met all these people and had all these wonderful experiences, and that's who was running the venue over the weekend, correct?
They were hosting the event. Yeah, they hold 2 or 3 a year. Yeah, in a live version. But then they have a weekly group that they meet with every Thursday Pacific time, 10:30 to noon Pacific, and you get to find out about stages where you can share your books, your podcasts, where you can find guests, and you get to talk about your career as a speaker and the audiences you'd like to talk to. So You come away from those 90 minutes having both stages and speakers, if that's the case for you. So, it's
So
great.
Speakers Playhouse is like a big networking, what do you want to call it? A networking conglomerate, or the Borg, like a networking Borg,
Yeah, it's
right?
just a bunch of people that have common interests and want to speak on stages and get more speaking. And then if they have stages, they offer that. In fact, one of those individuals, his name is Jeff Klein, he's putting on a speak-a-thon for adults, and all of the costs, it's like $5 or $10 maybe to give a 5-minute speech, and it might be $30 to give a 20-minute speech, something like that. But all of the revenue is going to come to the Speak Feed Lead project. So it's a fundraiser that he's doing for us. And if anybody, an adult, wants to get on stage, I think the theme is talking about life in high school, or what it was like to be in a club, on a drama team, or something like that. And so there's a specific theme around the speeches that you'll share. So it sounds like it's going to be really fun. Going to earn a little bit of money, and he's going to donate that to the Speak
Nice.
project. So
And you've got classes starting. I mean, you're opening up for kids to come in person or online. Is that right? And learn
live
how
in
to
the
speak from
local
their
area.
heart.
Yeah, live in the local area and attend our classes in person. We have a middle school group starting this week, and they learn podcasting, and they do their own podcast by the end of the 8 weeks. And then on Saturday, we start an high school adult course that in 6 weeks will get you your keynote speech ready. And then we can work on that to get it even further developed for stages. And then the following week, we have a class starting for the grades 4 to 5 group, and get them talking to each other and teachers, and be more confident with parents and so forth.
And your students are speaking on venues that are worldwide, right? And you're getting ready. I think you're taking one of your students, 11 years old, is going to go down and speak in front of how many people?
25,000. And Uma
Great.
Bambrew, she is my 11-year-old student. She's been with me a couple of years. She's now an author of a book that contributed with me to this book, and we're going to be on stage together on my Saturday talk. I'm going to give a little bit of an intro. She's going to play a part in a story that I'm telling, and then she's going to have 10 minutes to deliver her keynote speech, and then we'll come back.
Can you imagine being 11 years old? I mean, you're watching and you're looking at the future leaders of our world, right? I mean, starting them out so young and giving them, vision and direction and developing those skills. It's just off the charts. The return on investment is just off the charts, I can imagine.
Well, I just think about how much further I would be if I had that confidence when I was young. And so maybe you ask yourself that question: how much farther along would I be in my career or relationships or success if when I was young I had the confidence to speak up and say what I needed to say?
Yeah. It'd be a different outcome. I can guarantee you that much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although when I was young and in the United States Marine Corps, I kind of spoke up and spoke my heart to my drill instructor, and man, did I pay the price.
Well, see, you also learn when it's not appropriate to say anything, right?
Oh, he worked me out. He says, you're not going to stop until I'm tired. I'm like, oh my God. Bends and thrusts begin. I can still hear it in my ear. Bends and thrusts begin. Anyway, enough of that. Are you ready for the show? We've got a really special show for our listeners today. It's Valentine's Day, of course. And I want to set it up to where I'm letting everybody know the idea for today is not to get Todd to turn red. That's what we're talking about. Or blushing. Yeah, no blushing. I'm already blushing because I'm goofing up so much. So here we go. I'm going to introduce our guests. They're sitting there with big smiles on their face, ready to go. Molly Apple and Joe Dunn are the authors of the award-winning book, The Soulmate Experience. And I had the opportunity to interview them many, many years ago when that book came out. And that book was a practical guide to creating extraordinary relationships. They coach singles and couples on creating and sustaining relationships that are intensely passionate and profoundly connected. Like many other couples in a new relationship, they experienced a deeply profound, almost magical feeling of connection when they began dating almost 2 decades ago. Not wanting this experience to end, of course, they began a conversation about love, intimacy, and sex, and especially the question of how two people could keep their connection passionate, loving, and alive indefinitely. And they have come up with their latest book. I knew you guys had another book in you. I just knew it. And here it is, their newest book, Wild Monogamy, Cultivating Erotic Intimacy to Keep Passion and Desire Alive. Welcome, you two. How are you today?
We're doing great. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Jackie.
And you're all decked out with Valentine's Day. I didn't have the foresight to put anything up, but I got lots of stuff behind me. I can make one of those things Valentine's Day, I think.
And you love all those things, right?
I do. Love. Sometimes I love my things too much and I have too many things, but it's all good. It's all good. So Molly and Joe, welcome back to the show. It's been a little while. You know, when I first interviewed you on the Soulmate Experience, that book had just come out. How did that book change your direction or open your world up?
You know,
Good question.
It's been amazing to me how well that book has continued to do all this. It's 12 years later, and we continually hear from people who just feel like their approach to relationships has totally shifted having read that book. Now, I know that book needs some updating and we're going to do that, but I love every time we hear from somebody all these years later that they just got a hold of it. And a man in France recently wrote to me and said, I wanted this in my own language, so I translated it into French. He said, I spent the last year doing this, and here's the transcript if you want to use it for something. It's like,
wow,
that's
amazing. Yeah.
Wow, that's listening to the universe talk to you. Huh? Did you do a audiobook on it?
We did.
Yeah, I thought you had. I thought I had seen that.
Yeah, and we also will have an audiobook for the new one. And what's so wonderful about doing the audiobook is we do it together. We build a studio,
Right.
and
Oh, wow.
work with a sound person, but we read it ourselves, and it's so touching to read our own words with each other in the rooms, and really until we feel like we really expressed it exactly how we wrote it, and want people to be able to take it in.
And it's really fun to do that process too, of recording it together. And it just wouldn't be the same if we were listening to two other people read the book. And, you know, I'm sure we would have many complaints about that. So we're happy we do our own audiobooks.
And this time, you know, we tell so many really intensely personal stories in this book because we want to. Two things. One is we know that when you share a story about your own intimacy and maybe issues you've had and how you've overcome them, people can learn from that much more easily than a list of steps to take, because it just feels very authentic and they can feel that. And the other reason that we decided to tell our own stories in this book is because people get an idea of what it really means to be vulnerable and intimate, because that's what we're doing. That's what we're putting on display, and people connect with that. And we've heard, you know, our advanced readers say they cry at some of these stories that not only we tell, but that a lot of other couples have been willing to share their own stories of issues that they've had and how they've worked with them or overcome them. Those stories are just powerful.
We should preface it. I was just going to say, we should preface it a little bit that this book, their newest book, Wild Monogamy, is not released yet. It will come out, what did you say, March, middle of March?
In April.
In April.
Yeah, in April.
But people can get a couple of free chapters from it on our website.
Nice.
And that website is?
mollyandjoe.com.
Yeah.
So / Wild Monogamy free chapters, I think it is. You can download that.
Cool. We'll put a link to that in our newsletter. Okay, Jackie, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You go, girl.
That's all right. But for those who are listening, we might want to spell Molly is M-A-L-I. Molly. For those that are just hearing the audio. Also, I wanted to say that I'm always curious about how people write books together. How did you guys create an outline? Do each one of you share stuff from your own perspective, or do you take part in how it's all brought into from one perspective, even though it's a compilation or something? So how did you do that?
Well, I first said, I can't do this. That was my intro into this all. I said, I can't write a book.
That's a guy's response, totally.
And Molly kind of kept, she teased me into it, I would say.
But the
Ultimately.
process, one of the things that we've always done in our relationship is have these deep conversations on all of these. Anything that has to do with relationships has always fascinated me, and I've always wanted to talk about it. And he's been willing to have these incredible conversations, pretty much all we've done for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I record those conversations.
Oh, wow.
And then I transcribe them, and that's how we come up with an outline. So we probably had about 3 years of conversations that I transcribed and made a 200-page outline for this book a few years back when we started working on it. And then we work from there. I'll do up a little draft chapter, and then he reads it, and then we sit down and tear it apart together and have even deeper conversations.
And we might go through that passage 20 times before we get it right, and we're feeling good about it. So
Did you guys do all your own editing and publication and everything, or did you have some help?
Well, I was in book publishing. That was what I did.
That's right.
I was a nonfiction book editor, so I think in books, but regardless, you always want to have editors, good editors. So I have the best editorial team. Given all those years I worked, I just hired the best people I knew. And we also have a lot of what are called beta readers, right? People who are willing to read your drafts and give you comments. And I've worked with some authors years ago when I was still in publishing, before we started writing ourselves, who were afraid to share their work with anybody because they didn't want to hear anything bad about it. But those negative, so-called negative comments that people have are the most valuable, because it always, for me, if there's something that somebody has an issue with, there's something I can do to improve that passage. There's some bit of information, there's some, realizing that this brought up an insecurity in this reader. How can I address that while still, holding the interest of all the other readers? But that's what I feel has made our work so successful, is it can speak to so many people because we've had so many people reading it and giving feedback.
Yeah.
Nice. So you guys are a couple, and you're not only co-authors, but you are a couple. And how can you tell us about why your relationship makes you credible to write a book about this subject, and maybe how long you've been together? And we'll start at the beginning there.
Well, we have been together for 20 years now, and initially I don't think maybe you had ideas about writing a book, but she didn't tell me about it. And we started off on this magical relationship, and oh gosh, how many years later? It was probably, what was it, like 6 years later, after we'd started our relationship, we looked at each other and said, wow, we have this amazing relationship. What are we going to do with it? And Molly said,
well, I think, the question was, do we just keep enjoying it, or do we figure out why this is so incredible and try to distill that down into some ideas that other people could put to use? And, I'm just always been a book person, and I've always turned to books for information and help. And I really wanted to do that.
Obviously.
How did you know to create a relationship like that? Do you both come from homes where your parents had good relationships?
Yours did.
An okay relationship.
Yeah. I think for me, mine was awful. Childhood was abusive. Parents were alcoholics, did not get along, all of that. And I left fairly young. And I really remember driving across the country as far as I could get from my family, which was in Florida. And I drove to California because that was as far as I could go. And I was really on a high all that trip, knowing that I was going to create something totally different than I had grown up with. And I was deep into reading all kinds of books on mostly spirituality, but also life guides, like the one that you wrote, Todd. Books like that was what I read just continuously, and I eventually started a spiritual group that met at my house for years, weekly. And that's really where I got to put into practice a lot of the ideas and help other people use them, and started collecting kind of my own way of thinking about things. And that's what I got to share with him when I met him.
He was just waiting for me to come along and
Yeah.
Along for the ride, be pulled along, and your own becoming awakened. Is that the way it works, Joe?
it worked pretty well that way. Yes, yes. Being with Molly has awakened me to a lot of things.
I can imagine. So this new book, I was fascinated. I scanned through it, and what I found intriguing, one of the things I found intriguing is the beginning, because you pose a lot of questions, right? And I've had the experience, I think there's a couple things that are online, 50 questions that couples should ask each other, and these games, and oh my gosh, these questions get into some areas that you would never get into, but when they do pop into your world, you know, they could be deal breakers, not so much deal breaker, but you could really be affected by the other person's response. So these questions, I think, are designed to create that openness and to understand how that person's going to react. Was that intentional? Is that what you had in mind?
One of the reasons that the questions are so important to me, it's one of the things that we've always done, is delve into the stickiest questions.
The what ifs or the sticky questions. Yeah, what if your neighbor was? What if you saw your neighbor at the grocery store with another woman? What would you say something? I mean, those kinds of things are like, whoa.
And all of the things that couples have, we just avoid talking about because they're uncomfortable. But issues like jealousy, issues around our insecurities, we often don't talk about those, and yet they're affecting us in a really big way. And if people can, the way that we've structured that first section, which is called the intimacy inquiry, which has dozens and dozens of these kinds of questions that, honestly, they're not many that I've found online, because they're ones that I've found very intriguing to explore and maybe dicey.
Yeah,
for
they were
some
totally different that you know, get you to think about things. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, I'm so curious of your reaction to it anyway, because so few people have read this book so far. So I am interested. We've had several couples take that intimacy inquiry with them, and with a lot of caveats about things like, don't just start in on the questions together without having a sort of overarching conversation about, what if something comes up that makes us uncomfortable, or I start to feel insecure when I hear you talking. That's where we want to go with the conversation. The question is not that important as the potential for intimacy that's created when one of us starts to answer it.
The conversation, right? The connection from that conversation.
Well, so we're on the subject of intimacy then. Early on in your book, you've got one of your chapters is 6 keys to intimate adventures.
Yes.
You want to talk about some of those keys that you
I must have had some influence to the 6 keys.
That's right.
The very first one is connection comes first.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that just having that one guidepost, if you're going to try something new, that it's not about getting what you want. If you're going to have an intimate relationship that continues to grow in connection, and that you can continue to have new experiences, new exciting experiences together, you've got to build this foundation of real trust, which we call resilient trust. Because a lot of people, the trust in their relationship is just based on things like, well, you shouldn't do this, and I want you to do this, and you've agreed. And it really isn't trust. It's a little bit shaky.
Yeah. It's almost like a rule that you won't do this or you will do this, that you put in the form of, I trust you to do this.
Yeah.
Mm.
But when you try something new together, whether it's like, we're going to share just a little bit of a fantasy I've had. If my partner and I have never talked about our fantasies, but we both have a few, we're going to step into this very carefully. First, we're going to have this sort of overarching conversation about this might bring up uncomfortableness on us. So we've got to be ready for that.
What are we going to do if it does?
What are we going to do? And how can we?
Yeah, make the game rules first. So something has to, I want to say, poke at you or prod you into that kind of a discussion first, right? And then you have to set up the rules first.
Yeah, that's what our book's going to do. It's going to poke and prod you into having these conversations.
Nice. Yeah.
Because the connection that you can build when connection comes first, and that's the reason you're having the conversation, not because I want to do this thing or I want to talk you into doing this thing. We want people to have the intention, like you, Todd, wake up in the morning and start your day with an intention.
Puts a smile on my face.
Yes. So we want people to have an intention for these conversations. Why are we doing this? So that when things start to get a little bit spicy, we can go back to, oh, wait a second, we're doing this to be connected. I'm going to be vulnerable here and share with you why what you're talking about is making me feel insecure. And taking responsibility for my insecurity. It's something, I'm not going to put it on you. Like you have to not think about that thing you're thinking about because it makes me insecure. But I want to delve into where that insecurities come from and share with you something that happened in my past that's related to it, or something I always think about when I start thinking about, oh, my partner might want to do this and it makes me uncomfortable for these reasons. That intimacy is what we're after. Because when you can start talking on that level with your partner, you've created a deeper connection, a deeper place where you can explore together. Right?
Yeah. And it's actually quite freeing, right? To talk about some of these things that you keep to yourself. And once you finally get out there and start talking about it, it's like, wow, a weight comes off your shoulder. And there's just an immediate increase in intimacy that you have with your partner, because now you've allowed yourself to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Well, let's speak to that just a little bit, Joe, because that's a big thing in today's world. I mean, women are more open. Women are more open to different ideas and trying things. And, as a guy, as a United States Marine, I can remember a time in my life where it was just, things were my way. And I don't know that I would have gone in that direction or been open to having those discussions. So, Joe, speak to those guys out there. Well, not to those guys, but to the guys, to the women of those guys, and what strategies, what can they do to kick open that door?
Well, I think, when I think about our process, I have to give Molly a lot of credit, because when we have these conversations or try something new, she makes it fun, right? So if we have one fun experience like that, then next time she says, hey, would you like to try something similar? I'm like, yeah, that sounds like fun. So you start to break down the walls that maybe you've come into the relationship with, and all the things you were going to keep to yourself and never share. And, eventually you start to let them go a little bit. And
trust, right? That's what we talked about before. You start to build trust in knowing that you can speak your mind and your heart and not be judged for it,
rejected or judged or laughed at. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be important.
Fascinating.
And I think, it's not always easy for guys, because as you said, they're raised a little bit, I hate to use the word macho, but they're raised in a way that it doesn't allow for much sharing of feelings, much emotion, and that's where intimacy really is. So the more we can get guys to break those barriers down, the more intimacy they're going to experience in their relationships.
So one key to that is learning how to invite them into that conversation, as opposed to
Cajoling them
or shaming them into it.
No treats involved.
There are treats involved. Absolutely. That's a good one.
Many treats.
So I hear connection, I hear trust, I hear acceptance and invitation. So are those all one of those 6 keys?
They are all involved in those.
Yeah.
And one of them is the communication, which is why we start off with those questions to give people an introduction to what kinds of conversations you could have that would build that kind of intimacy and trust and connection that you want if you're going to try something on the edge. And really, our whole goal with this book is to help people find where the edges of their relationship are, because those are places where they can play. They want to keep their relationship exciting. They've got to be exploring something new together. And the way to do that, first of all, we want to do that in a safe way. So there's a lot that we need those 6 keys before we head off and try something new. But one of the things that intimacy inquiry does is help couples see where the edges of their comfort zones are together. And that's where those places they can play are.
And then expand them.
Yeah.
And do they expand? I mean, is that expandable? You work with many couples. Are there just boundaries that are set, or does the world kind of open up? I would imagine the world opens up.
I think a lot of the boundaries come unconsciously from our conditioning,
Fear
and our fears. And our insecurities create those, which is why those questions are pointed the way they are. They're intended to find those spots.
So why is there such a high rate of divorce today? And why are so many young people choosing not to commit to a long-term relationship with people? What's missing? From
our
society that's not the book is the one thing, right? It's going to be the answer to
The Bible.
But you obviously have something more than most people do, but what do you see as the reason for that? Is it because we shut down? Is it because we're not willing to connect to each other? Is that why?
I think that's a big part of it. I think, by shutting down or not being vulnerable with your partner, the relationship tends to stagnate, right? You're doing the same thing every day. I'm still holding this thing back. Those little pieces that could bond you more intimately, you're never opening up and sharing. So, the purpose of the book is to sort of get people into that mode of being vulnerable, trying it out, seeing how it feels, seeing what fun you can have with it. And then, man, you never have to leave the house even to have this kind of fun.
Yeah.
Well, I would imagine too that time is an issue, and I know you spend a little bit of that about that in the book, and carving out our busy schedules to be together and maybe talk about those questions, right?
And that's another purpose for those questions, is you could take them out. If you're out to dinner, take one question with you, because you can have this intimate experience, and you're in a restaurant with all these people around, but you're talking about something so incredibly spicy that
one question out to what would normally be a routine, maybe even dull dinner that you do every Thursday or Friday.
Right.
One question with you can make all the difference in your experience that evening out to dinner.
Oh my goodness, you two! I just had a flash, a vision. You're gonna have to come up with a card deck.
We could do that easily.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
You're gonna need to have a card. I think that is an awesome idea, because many of us just go to dinner and we just kind of, sit there and eat a meal, and yeah, it rained today, and oh yeah, it was pretty cloudy, and those kinds of things, and those in-depth conversations just aren't occurring. And how can you explore those edges if you don't have those conversations?
Right.
Yeah, I think our real purpose in this is finding ways to help people turn a long-term relationship into a long-term adventure.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so many of the things that come up, the issues that we're all going to face at some point, if they're not health issues or insecurity issues, aging is going to bring some of these things, menopause is going to bring some of these things. There's always going to be something that comes up in the space that threatens to shut things down. And those are the places, there's such great opportunity in there. And this is not just lip service to this. That's why there are so many stories in this book of how people have approached all kinds of problems, whether it's problems with the way their bodies function, problems with what their mind is telling them when they're trying to be intimate with their partner, but they're having all of these self-defeating thoughts or insecure thoughts. We give so many different stories, real life stories of how couples have used those moments to find deeper connection and intimacy with each other. That builds the trust, and that makes them more open to doing more of this work in the future, just like you said.
Yeah.
Once you've done it.
Because it becomes fun. Once you get over the initial, oh, I can't talk about that, I can't do this. And you just, you swallow hard and you go, okay, here, I'm going to lay it out there. And then, if your partner doesn't reject you, if they don't belittle you for your comment, then it's the opportunity to really go deep. And, the person who's sharing feels a sense of relief, right? Because we all have the stuff that we want out there in the open. And yet it's whether we were raised not to talk about these things or whether we're too insecure or embarrassed, as soon as we can get them out there, life becomes a lot more fun.
Yeah. And we can start finding ways together to approach, if I have a certain insecurity around my body, then we together will come up with exercises we can do together to help me feel more loving towards that part of myself.
Yeah.
And those explorations are so intimately connecting that I can't imagine either of us ever wanting to leave this relationship, because this person it's our person, right?
That's right.
That I would come to with anything that scared me or I was feeling insecure about. This is where I go.
Right.
So do you find, Molly, and in the conversations that you two have had together, that a lot of the changes early on in an intimate relationship that a couple might have has to do with mostly the woman whose body is changing because she's having children, she's more responsible for other people besides her own, she can't put as much attention perhaps, or it feels that way, to her partner because there's these other little people who are requiring a lot more attention. Do you find that early on in those relationships that is a big factor for the woman who has all these changes happening and it's hard for her to open up about those types of things?
I think that's true a lot of time. And I'm just thinking of a story that we tell in the book about a woman who, once you start having a kid and you're breastfeeding and you just don't want to be touched, you've just had enough.
Mm-hmm.
And this couple found a really cool ways to work with that, where he was, saying, okay, those are off limits to me for now, but I can still look, and let's just let me look and dress you up in a way that, and for him saying, I'm not going to touch you until you're ready. For a year, he just had to yearn to be able to have that connection with her chest that he used to have. And it got, it made things spicier for him that he couldn't touch.
And the fact that it took the pressure off of her also made them more connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she knew it was her decision of when she was going to be ready for that again, and that they would approach that time slowly when that time came.
Yeah. So that's that trust you're talking about, is giving each other space.
Right.
to
And
be
and
ready.
talking about the issue, right? What's the problem? I mean, once another person realizes what the issue is, there's no more speculation. There's no more wondering. There's no more what if or why, or, is it something else? Is it me? I mean, it's out in the open. It's
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, and it's a secret that you share, really, because these things can be so intimate. If there's some aspect of intimacy that I have shied away from for a particular reason, of something that happened to me in my past that I'm embarrassed about, or just growing up in this culture, we're
Yeah.
given certain ideas about who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to look like, and we can carry really heavy burdens about
Or how we're supposed to act, right? I mean, kids are exposed to different things that have nothing really to do with the way it is, right?
So if I can share with this person this part of my past that was embarrassing to me, and he holds it in a certain way, and he talks to me lovingly about it, and we talk about, oh, what are some ways I could learn to let go of this? I mean, you can just imagine like how connected we are being able to have those conversations.
Totally. Well, something else that comes to my mind, Joe and Molly, is it's not all about intimacy, right? It's about shared visions, dreams, and goals. I mean, doesn't that come up, or does that come up in the questioning? And because that affects outcomes, right? That affects connectedness. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's something we talked about in the Soulmate Experience, was having a shared intention for your life together. And those kinds of big things, whether it's we want to raise children that have a certain value system, or we want to be adventurers and, travel over the world, or we want to create this thing together, having that kind of big intention for your relationship is something that really helps make you feel glued together.
Right. And it's like a guiding light in a way of where your relationship is going.
Mhm.
It's kind of like you get up, Todd, in the morning and you say, life is going to be great. And that guides you, right?
Mhm.
it certainly has planted the seeds
Yeah.
for anything that's coming, right?
So we would use an intention. If we go out to dinner, we might create intention together. We'll sit in the car and do it. Like it could be something simple like, we just want to have a good time tonight together. But it could also be like, we're going to a party. We want to connect with some cool people and have some fun conversations. And we'll state that aloud to each other as we walk into it.
Yeah, it's nice because then we're both thinking the same thing and we both have the same goal. And
it sort of operates in the background like yours does, right? It's like this energetic game plan for what's going to happen.
Nice. Now I recognize that monogamy is in your title, and it's part of the book. So, but you're also talking about adventures, right? So my question is related to, there's a lot of people who feel having open marriages is what's going to provide the adventure, right? Do you feel opposite of that because you're proclaiming that monogamy is a better choice?
I'm not saying it's a better choice, but I am saying it's possible to have continual adventures within a monogamous relationship. And we've coached so many people who have tried an open relationship, have tried a polyamorous relationship, and things fell apart. Now, obviously, that's not everyone's experience, but there's a lot of people who weren't ready for that choice, who could have, in our mind, could have done other things.
oh yeah,
Besides just jump to that without the tools and the connection and the intimacy that we feel you'd need to navigate that and make that a successful choice.
I think it's oftentimes much more challenging for people than they think it's going to be.
Oh yeah.
Oh, no problem. I could go out to have a relationship with this person and still love my partner just as much. I mean, that's what you think going in. Sometimes that changes fairly quickly, right? Your attention is completely over here to this other person. You're forgetting about your partner. It can be a recipe for disaster.
And you also don't have the tools to deal with the insecurity and jealousy that's inevitably going to arise. And so much of the exercises that we suggest in our new book are intended to have you delve into the insecurity and jealousy that arises if we just go out to a bar and I see him chatting with someone else, an attractive woman, right? I could get that little feeling here. But we've worked with this so much, I can now use that feeling to fire up my desire for this guy rather than feeling so overwhelmed by it that all I want to do is grab him and leave.
Right.
We can use that situation to our advantage.
So she grabs me to leave for a different reason.
Right. Right. Gotta get
Well,
home now.
let's drill down into that a little bit, because I did notice that and I read that section. So you propose exploring that, and right, so maybe speak to that a little bit, because I can imagine that would strengthen a relationship, right? Because you would know for sure what you're witnessing or what it is that's transpiring, and process that a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are all, I shouldn't say all, but the vast majority of us, whether we're in a relationship or not, still find other people attractive, right? And the question is, what do you do with that? Do you, because of your partner's feelings, do you shut it all down? You never let on that you find anybody else attractive? Or do you be honest and say, yes, we find other people attractive. And if there's an attractive woman, I might look. I probably will look, right? I mean, if I'm talking eye to eye with Molly, I'm not going to go like this, but if we're just out at dinner and I notice somebody, I will look. In fact, I think Molly wants me to now, because she wants to get that little charge so that she can grab me and take me home.
Right. Yeah.
So is that a little charge, Molly? Does that kind of open?
I've worked on my own jealousy for so long that it takes a little bit to get that charge going, and I like the feeling of it, because this is a totally safe relationship. So I want to feel that. So if there's an opportunity for me to see him in conversation with somebody else and step back and just be an observer, I mean, that is enjoyable to me. Because
that's fascinating.
Yeah, we've been conditioned to think that every bit of jealousy is bad and that we should do whatever we could to cut that out and not.
Or we instantly go to anger, right? And then it's resentment, and then it's, you've hurt me. It's a ping pong game. You've hurt me, now I got to hurt you back, and now you've hurt me back, I got to hurt you. It's crazy how that can explode. But you found a key to harness that energy, and I'm calling that sexual transmutation.
That's good.
Yeah, I like it.
I think I learned that from a book that I've read. I'm trying to think of his name now. It's a famous book, but yeah, that's fascinating.
I mean, what a better way to deal with jealousy than the ping pong that you described, right? Of anger and resentment.
And where is all that coming from? It's because we are not honest about the insecurity that's at the root of jealousy.
The discussion hasn't occurred. We have no idea what's triggering me, what's triggering him, why he's doing what he's doing, and why I'm reacting the way I'm reacting, right?
So that's where we want to go.
What's the difference then between rational jealousy and irrational jealousy, and what are some of the behaviors that can come from the original feeling?
So the difference is, rational jealousy is jealousy that I would have in response to an actual threat to my relationship. If Joe was actually developing a friendship that excluded me, and that it could get stronger and stronger, and I could be left on the outside, I would call that rational.
That would be
jealousy.
rational jealousy.
Most instances of jealousy are what I like to call irrational jealousy, that it's based on my own insecurities is where it's coming from. And there's nothing going on. If he's watching somebody walk by that catches his eye because she's attractive, there's nothing rational about my jealousy about that. There's nothing in this situation that's a threat to me.
Right. So do you have to just tell change your thoughts in that moment to say there's no reason to be jealous of him looking at somebody?
That's very helpful to be able to do that self-talk. And so in the chapter on jealousy in the new book, there's a long self-inquiry about your history with jealousy, the thoughts you've had when you've been in jealous situations, what your responses have been, what are the triggers for you, because you really have to do self-inquiry to figure that all out. So you just don't, the anger just flares up and you just yell, you just stop, you should stop doing whatever that is.
I'm jealous and it's your fault.
Right.
So it does take some, we actually have a course available on our website called Overcoming Jealousy that helps you go through that process of looking deep into your past and your history and your thought systems. But then when you've got a partner that you can actually have a conversation about it and say, when I saw you looking at her, I told myself this, and have him help me reframe my thinking about that situation. It's so extra powerful to have help with that.
Yeah.
Or be able to speak of it, right? And not hold it in and let it fester.
Absolutely.
And I'm not
Especially in the
blaming.
moment.
Yeah.
What were you going to say? You're not blaming. Oh, you're not blaming him.
Right. I'm not blaming him. I'm putting the blame where it really belongs, which is on my own insecurities and my past. So it might be I was with somebody who did have affairs, and I keep thinking back to that, or keep having a feeling about, oh, I remember when this happened before, it meant something not good was going to roll
Have
out.
the same feeling, and it's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Looks like we just have about 5 minutes left. There's so much more to talk about. I think we're going to have you guys back on. Is there anything else that we're missing? I mean, this book covers many topics and gets those questions out there and gets that conversation going. What is it? What is your hope for this book?
That people will approach all of the so-called issues in their relationship with a new mindset, that there's potential for those issues to contribute to their intimacy and connection. And that's why there are so many stories in there from real couples dealing with some pretty profound things that for many couples would say, well, we're never going to be intimate again because this thing happened.
Right.
There's stories from couples in there that said, we're not going to let that hold us back.
Yeah.
That takes some deep commitment, right?
It does, especially initially, but then once you see the benefits of doing that, then you don't want to go back to your old way of holding things back. Right? You want to get it out there. You want to have that deeper connection with your partner, and you want your partner to understand where you're coming from and why you have these thoughts or fears or concerns that you have.
It's so healing to share it too. It's just that in itself just is so healing.
It brings up from a question in a changing world, things are just in this big entropy going on, and things are changing. People have different ideas. They see Joe and Sally doing this different things. So maybe sum it up for us. What are the benefits of monogamy and how we approach that?
Well, I think that in monogamy, you have the opportunity to go deeper than you ever could if you're trying to play the field, right? Because you can't, this requires time and commitment and attention and the willingness to have fun. And if you're spread so thin because you're in an open relationship and you're trying to have a connected relationship over here and one over here and then one with your partner, it doesn't feel like you can really go deep enough to experience the real joy in relationship.
Interesting.
I'm
assuming you guys give some steps to that, and what would be the main piece of advice you would give to one, a couple just starting out, and two, a couple who've been married for say 30 years or more?
For me, I think that there is so much to be explored I'm sort of rambling here, but I've got an idea. And it's about those conversations. In both cases, there's
Yes.
always something more to explore together. Whether you just met, it's obvious, right? Relationships exciting when you just met because there's so much to explore, but that doesn't have to stop. There's always more because we're always changing, we're always growing, we're always aging. There are always things to explore together. So I think that's my answer in both cases.
I couldn't have said it better.
Nice.
Oh my goodness. Is there anything that we're missing, Molly and Joe? Any last minute things? You have a copy of the book? Oh my goodness. I didn't ask you earlier. There it is.
Yes, and we are in love with this cover.
I think so too. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So
Is that a rose? Is that what
it
that
is.
Yeah.
It's looking right down the center of a rose.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah,
Well,
so
Go ahead.
the 3 chapters that we have available for you has the intimacy inquiry in it, so you can get started right
Good
away.
place to start.
And you can find that at mollyandjoe.com. We'll have a link on our website and in Jackie's newsletter coming out toward the end of this week. I think, Jackie, any takeaways?
Oh,
Anything
yeah.
else you want to ask? I know.
A lot. No, it's been really interesting. And what I love most about it is that it's a conversation, because that is in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
That is what I teach people, to be curious enough to ask questions and start conversations. And so that's what you guys are preaching. And I really appreciate that. And even in very new relationships, to those who are most intimate, the conversation is the key, right?
Mhm.
So thank
We
you.
started the conversation 20 years ago and it's still going on today.
Nice.
Any,
Well, Joe, you may be a little atypical of most men who don't necessarily like to have conversations. So
I don't know that I like to having conversations 20 years ago as much as I do now, but when you learn how much fun you can have, where the conversations lead and how healing they can be,
yeah.
you tend to jump in and say, yeah, let's do this more
Okay.
and
Good.
more.
not only that, the awakening that a male can experience once he begins, many traditions recognize that once a man discovers his feminine side, then the whole world wakes up to him. And it's not that you become feminine or anything. You just discover that ability and that ability to connect on another level, and your whole world will open up. And I think that's
It makes you a more complete person.
totally. Instead of being a robot, right, Joe? We've all been.
Exactly.
That's about all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope that you will tell a friend about the show. We have our YouTube channel, Life Mastery Radio with Todd and Jackie. All of our shows are up there. This show will be up there toward the end of the week. So if you like something that you heard, or you have to grab your significant other and say, hey, come on, we need to listen to this, right? You can find the video of this show, and you guys can sit down and have a great conversation. Thanks, Molly and Joe, for showing up as you and bringing a great message. I hope you'll come back, because there is lots more that we could talk about, I'm sure.
We'd love to come back. This went way too fast. And thank you, Todd and Jackie, for having us. It's been great.
Yeah.
And here I was worried the whole show that I would be blushing in the entire time. And I think that we took that out of the picture. Lastly, next time, I'm sure Molly's just like, oh yeah.
She is. She's dying to make you blush, Todd.
Oh, lastly, please make it a great day, because as you learned today, it's all about choice. Choose to be you and choose to have those conversations. Bye-bye for now.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to Life Mastery Radio. Join Todd Allen and Jackie Bailey and their guests of leading authors, speakers, coaches, and entrepreneurs weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific. Learn to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery through stories and messages to support your well-being and most evocative dreams. Visit their website, www.lifemasteryradio.com. Join their mailing list and be notified about upcoming guests. That's lifemasteryradio.com.